So, welcome to Challenging Leadership. My name is Stephen Mather, and from across the pond, he's here, he's there, he's every flipping where. It's Jared Scott. Hello, Jared.
I like the way that you introduced that. That means we're talking about something that we both like then with that
Yeah.
introduction.
I also toned down the language because I want to get a clean rating on Apple Podcasts. So, yeah. So, what are we talking about
Yep.
today?
We are talking about something that we both love, and that's the series on Apple TV called Ted Lasso.
Yeah,
What's
yeah.
Ted Lasso about? Because, I mean, maybe we're the only two people that like it. I doubt that, but
Yeah, so
what's the premise of this?
my understanding is that it kind of stemmed from an advertisement on American TV, and this character Ted Lasso kind of grew from that, and they made a whole series out of his character. It's based in the UK. It's based in London, an imaginary football club called Richmond, and Ted is an American football coach who we find out why he comes over to England, but he comes over to England with his mate, Coach Beard, and they basically manage a Premiership football team, even though particularly Ted knows nothing about football, as we call it in the UK, soccer,
Yeah.
as you call it. Um,
Yep.
I think it's a fascinating study into all sorts of things, but it's just great fun as well. So, yeah, that's what we're talking about today.
That's right. That's right. Hey, you know what? I gotta tell you the truth. The episode on Ted Lasso is something I'm excited about because it's honestly what helped me to understand a little bit of the culture over across the pond,
Yeah.
as we say it.
Yeah.
I hope there's not too much caricature and that it's
Well, we can
there's some
talk about that. I
reality to
think,
it.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it's one of the things we were talking just before we started the recording, but it is one of the things that I really like about this show is that it is good natured and
hmm
it has a very warm heart. So it's not for kids. It's got lots of swearing in it. It's got some topics that you wouldn't want your kids to be around to listen to, but it's very good natured. And although yes, of course there are some stereotypes there, they play with them, to be honest, more than anything. And I think there's also, like
hmm
all stereotypes, not all actually, many
Yes.
stereotypes. There's a
Yeah.
kind of kernel of truth in a lot of what they're talking about. So obviously all Brits love drinking tea and drinking beer and eating fish and chips, um, and of course that's not true. But of course there is some truth in the fact that we generally do quite like a cup of tea and fish and chips and beer.
Yeah.
So
But
yeah, there are some
I
truths there.
the thing is that I feel like I'm already halfway there because I too appreciate a nice cup of English breakfast tea in the
Yeah,
morning.
good.
I have to have my cream before though. I don't want it with or after. So
Well, you see that straight away there, we've got a cultural break because we don't call it cream, we put milk in our tea.
I know.
When my future son-in-law went to the States to do some research work, he was really annoyed that he couldn't find any proper milk anywhere to put in his tea. So that was a big
Yeah.
cultural no. Yeah, I mean, having a cup of tea is funny. I was saying the other day, like English people make a noise after drinking a cup of tea, especially if you've had a long day, and nothing else makes an English person make that noise. It's kind of a it's that sort of noise.
Mm,
It's a real kind of
yeah.
at last I've got a cup of tea in my hand. That first cup of tea is yeah, it's great. So yeah, of course, some of those stereotypes are absolutely true, but I suppose we are
Yeah.
technically. Well, not technically. We are actually about leadership as a podcast, so we ought to
Yes,
talk
we
about
are,
that
but
really.
we've
So,
got to warm up to it.
well, that's true.
We got to get everybody around.
Yeah. But why? What's our excuse, I suppose, for talking about a program that we love?
Well, honestly, I'll just say that I think the big thing that I noticed is I was like, wow, there's actually some type of leadership point in every single episode that
Mm,
you can delve into.
yeah,
Um, in some episodes go deeper, some are a little more silly, but man, there's always these points where you're like, wow,
yeah,
that was pretty deep. And to find something deep in what I would consider to be kind of a comedy of sorts, it actually it's good because I think that it resonates that Leadership doesn't have to be serious all the time. Even when you're dealing with very serious issues, I just appreciate the way the writers developed episodes, and I think there's things that we can take away from it. That's, I guess, why we want to talk about that, so we can say, hey, this is something that we can try to copy. Maybe not the mustache and the goofiness of Ted, but there are some good things in there from a lot of the characters.
Yeah, and also some, I suppose, warning lessons as well. Things that are
Hmm.
done that you say, well, that's probably not quite right, or that's caused some problems. So yeah, I think there's lots of lessons to learn from the show. You've got a couple of episodes, well, 3 episodes in all that you want to talk about. We're going to start to tackle one or two of those. So
Yeah,
we can talk about this forever. If you like this, listeners,
sure.
then we'll talk more about
Yeah.
it. So
No.
so what are the
Yeah,
episodes then that
yeah.
you want to talk about?
Well, let's jump into one that stood out to me, and that was in season one,
Yeah,
episode five. There was an episode called "Tan Lines," and there's a couple of. It's almost like each episode has like the personal thing going on the side, and then also the soccer club,
yeah,
Richmond, and there's actually some, I think, some powerful lessons we can take from both of those scenarios. Ted. Spoiler alert.
yeah.
If you
Well,
haven't
there's
watched
going to
it,
be lots of
you're
them.
going to find out that Ted is going through a tough time with his marriage,
Mm,
and it's going to culminate in some divorce papers that need to be signed. But it's complicated, and I thought about how leadership can be complicated because of the fact that we have to almost say put on that smiley face when we
yeah,
come to work, even if we're having a tumultuous time on our personal life. And that may be a divorce. It may be we're having struggles with our family. It could be our health. It could be so many things. And it's like, where do you balance that with putting on that facade,
yeah,
as it were? Like, where's that line at? And I think that what we see with Ted Lasso is that he tries to be two different people at many times. The person that he appears to his teammates and the ownership of the football club, and then he has this inner side that you see in the behind the scenes where he's really struggling
mm,
emotionally with a lot of things
yeah,
to the point where it affects him with his anxiety and things like that. So it just really it hit hard with me just personally because of the fact that I've actually experienced some of those things,
mm,
dealing with anxiety and sometimes some clinical depression. It runs in my family, and I was like, yeah, I says that's really hard because when I go through the doors at work, nobody knows.
yeah,
I remember when I went through my divorce, my boss at the time, this was about 6 years ago, he said, I had no idea you were going through that stuff. You're just
mm,
so solid and just
yeah,
happy and chipper. And so it made me think about, like, and it's sometimes it's even tough to talk about that. There's still a stigma around mental illness, I think. And then when you get to a certain point in your career, it's almost like, well, you just can't have that anymore. That's for the regular Joes, the
yeah,
regular folks. But so it really impacted on me. That it was like, it made him real. I think you could put yourself in his situation if you've ever dealt with certain things. And I know that gets into the other episodes we're going to talk about as well. But
yeah,
um, I think the thing is that he he was able to step back into his leadership role, even though he's going through all of that, and he made some incredibly tough decisions. Everybody hates him in the Richmond Football Club, and he doesn't know it yet. But the owner's trying to sabotage him. I mean, literally,
yeah,
there's so much going on, and
yeah,
then he's. I don't know. You have to explain to me how much of an impact would that be if, like, um, for say somebody's like, hey, we're gonna pull Messi,
yeah,
and
yeah.
we're gonna, because one thing I had to learn is, like, when you substitute in American football, you can go back in later. It's like,
Ah,
hey,
right, okay.
you're not,
Mm.
go sit on the bench and cool off. But I was like, in proper football, or soccer as we call it, it's like you get exchanged when that sign comes out. You're done.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think that sort of there's two plots, as you say. Well, there's more than two in these episodes. There's lots of little plots
Sure.
going on, and they explore the characters in very interesting ways. Um, but yeah, the other main plot is this character Jamie Tart, who's the star, as you alluded to, um, and we see that Ted is losing patience with Jamie Tart, who is a superstar. He's the best player on the team. He scores most of the goals. Everybody loves him, but he's not a team player. So he's not passing the ball. He's not
Yeah.
bringing other people in. He doesn't care about his teammates. He has no team affiliation really, and it's all about him. And that's obviously something that is completely against Ted Lasso's philosophy of life, really, but also football. But I think what we do see is Ted. He does start to lose his cool a little bit. He gets interrupted once or twice, which stops him from really losing it. But I
Hmm.
think we do see Ted starting to demonstrate some real frustration and irritation with this character, and of course, who can blame him? Um,
Yeah.
he's a real jerk, but yeah, I think that's quite interesting. But yeah, so he makes a decision to take him off, so that there's the 2-2. I think going into the second half, and it's really
Hmm.
about do we replace this guy who is the star, but he's really not a team player, um, you know, and obviously that's what he does, which is why everybody hates him. I think what's interesting though, he goes up to the subplot in the background, the
Hmm.
long arc, as you
Yes.
mentioned, is
Yes.
that at the beginning of this whole series, Ted Lasso is really a guy that's been brought in because the director wants to sabotage the club. So she thinks getting this guy in who knows nothing about football is a great idea because he's going to make a mess of it. So
Hmm.
actually,
Hmm.
she doesn't care. But he
Yeah.
asks her for permission to replace a team member. So what do you think about that? Because I have problems with that.
Yeah, that well, I'm interested to hear what your problems are, but I'll go
Okay.
ahead and speak to
Yeah, yeah,
that.
yeah.
I thought that was a very interesting thing for him to do. And and then it made me go, wow, how do you even do that? Because to set the backstory, like for the audience that's listening in, it was 2-0, and you notice I said not 2-0, it's 2-0.
I'm impressed.
And Jamie Tart,
Mm,
he scores 2 goals.
that's right.
So imagine you
Hmm.
brought it to a 2-2,
Yeah,
and then you're like, hey, I'm pulling him off, and wow.
yeah.
I mean, I'm a baby when it comes to understanding, Premier League football, but I would be kind of ticked, I think.
Of
and
course.
and then and then so he just sees all this going on, and he goes up into the stands, and I don't know if it's because he felt like he was a new leader or what, but I think part of me says a real leader would be like, I'm just doing this, I'm not
Yeah,
asking for permission,
yeah.
you
And
know.
I think that's right. So understandable from a human perspective, just as a human being, of course, he feels like he wants to get a bit of an okay, but he's employed to make those decisions.
Hmm.
Why would the director
Yeah.
know the tactics and what should happen next? So really, and he was lucky because obviously, unbeknownst to him, she doesn't care anyway, and she's happy if they lose. But what
Yeah.
if the director had said, "No, I want I are you kidding? He's our best player. Keep him on."
Hmm.
Then, of course, he's lost
Yeah.
his authority. So, if you're given authority, I think it's one of the things that I try to emphasize when I'm training teams is that when you're given authority, then that is, you have that responsibility and you make the decisions. That's not to say that you don't take advice and you don't listen to that advice. But if he really wants to do that, if he thinks that's the right move for whatever reason, then I think he should
Yeah.
have just done it and then explain himself afterwards if he needed to.
Yeah, I agree. And I was thinking about it on a practical level of application. I mean, there's two sides to it, right? I mean, we could paint the picture that maybe she, the owner of the club, was maybe micromanaging, but she was really hands off. She just wanted Ted to
That's
just
right.
ruin the whole thing, so she
Yeah.
didn't care. So
Yeah.
can't use that excuse. And made me
Mm.
think, it's like, well, as leaders, if we're expecting people in our charge to make decisions, we have to make sure we let them.
Yeah.
We have a culture of not micromanaging. On the other end, if we in the position of leadership need to make decisions, then if we're going to keep going to people saying, "Hey, is it okay if I do this?" They're going to start going, "Why do I have you?
Right.
Why are you in the position if
Exactly.
I've got to do the managers?" I know we like to interchange manager leader, but if you're a manager, then your job is to manage.
Mhm.
That's why they have you in that position,
That's
and
right.
so it takes a degree of confidence. And also, if you're going to make something rash like getting rid of your all star, then
Yeah.
then I mean, obviously he didn't have the choice to like fire him. He was just pulling him out for the
Yeah.
one match, but
That's right.
there needed to be evidence for that, and I'm sure he could have presented that. And you can see, another spoiler alert, that it ended up with them getting their victory.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. This is the other thing about football is that it's anything can happen. Like I suppose any sport is the same, really. So it seems like a crazy thing to do, but actually sometimes to mix it up is the right thing to do. So he could justify his decision if he really wanted to. But yeah, so I thought that's
Sure.
interesting. I'm interested in why the script had that in the show. I guess it was perhaps to demonstrate that she didn't really care, so he could kind of do
Yeah.
what he wanted. But I thought it was kind of
Yeah.
interesting. Anything else about that episode that you want to
I,
highlight?
I, yeah, I think the maybe the one final thing is I thought that there's a little bit of subtlety there with Roy Kent, another character. Roy Kent is this footballer that's been super successful. He was
Yeah,
a star, but now he's on the other side of his
mm,
career.
yeah,
He's got
yeah,
injuries, he's slowed down some. And of course he can't stand Jamie Tart.
that's
And
right.
so, you know, but I think because of it's almost, you could see that Ted kind of in a subtle way leans on Roy. Like he's trying to mentor Roy, but he's also like, he understands that Roy gives him a little bit of subtle direction, if you call it that.
Yeah,
And you could see that at the end, after they won the match, he says, "Well done." That was like, that's about as big of a compliment as you're going to get from this guy,
yeah,
because
yeah,
he's pretty rough.
right.
Especially,
Yeah,
you'll if you watch all the episodes, you see he actually does care. But
yeah,
I thought it was a leadership point that you don't always have to be the one that makes all of the decisions, even if you are making the decisions, if that
yeah,
makes sense. So
yeah,
you can kind of take a lead from some of your experienced people. You may be leading people that have been with the company far longer than you
that's
have.
right.
They're just not. They have no desire to be in your shoes, and but they offer insights where you're like, wow,
Yeah,
perspective.
yeah.
And we can take perspective from people.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's right, and I actually think that's a real theme of the character all the way through. Actually, his delegation
Hmm.
skills, he actually demonstrates
Yeah.
really good delegation skills. So his
Hmm.
his friend Coach Beard, he knows more about the sport. He's
Yeah.
actually quite switched on to the game, and
Yep.
Roy Kent's there, and then we learn more about this other guy Nathan, and so he leans on these people quite well. He has no his ego's quite well managed. He doesn't need all the praise, all the glory. He's
Yeah.
really interested in results. Again, that's a great management trait. Actually, he just cares about results, and to him, results is not only about the scores on that scoreboard. It's also about the team and the way that the team play together and the
Yes.
process as well. So I think
Yeah.
that there's some lots of good things. I guess the other thing I would say, we're going to talk more about the mental health element of this when we talk about the
Hmm.
second episode that you want to look at.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
this question of how much. So you've already touched on it, but I feel like it is one of the main themes of the episode. Is how much can you and should you put that face on? When you come into work,
Hmm.
and how much should you reveal about yourself? Um, I think that's a really difficult question and one that you have to work out for yourself. And I think sometimes we get it right, sometimes we get it wrong. But I think that the show does explore that quite a lot in lots of different episodes, actually.
Yeah, yeah, and the the balance for me is maybe you've seen this. People use maybe their personal situation as an excuse to be a jerk.
Yeah.
I want to use another word that they use a lot in that, but I'm not going to.
Rhymes with
But
merchant banker. Is that the one you're talking
yeah, that's right.
about?
Yep, these
Yeah.
bankers.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But maybe, I mean, I've seen that where it's like, okay, you're going through a terrible time, but it's like you had a bad day at work and you go home and kick the dog. It's like,
Mm,
why would you do that?
yeah,
And so I think that sure, there needs to be balance there, but I think that maybe some open communication, that they at least understand it's not them.
mm,
I've said that to my team. I said, hey, look, I just want you to know, I've got something going on personally. I
yeah,
said, so if you see a change in my behavior, I says it's not a reflection of any of you. And I think that you don't have to get into the details,
yeah,
but people pick up on things.
mm,
Like if your leadership style is one way, and all of a sudden now you're being short. Like I mean, look at Ted. That's what was very impactful. He's always goofy and silly, and then all of a sudden he would just totally like change his tone, and everybody
mm,
probably, where did that come from?
yeah, yeah,
And we don't want our people that we're leading to go, where did that come from? And so you have to just know your team, and you have to use your own way of doing it. Everybody's got their own way. I don't think there's really a script for that. It's more about you knowing what's right for the situation.
yeah. And I guess actually, it's just thinking it's kind of very closely related to one of your favorite topics. Your book is called Authentic Leadership. And the question of
Yes.
authenticity, I think, is related to this. And so it kind of it's a tricky one. So you feel terrible, you're under pressure, you're anxious about what's happening. That is authentically how you feel. So
Hmm.
you might say, well, I just need to be me. And so if that means I shout at people, if that means that I fly off the handle, well, that is authentically how I feel at that time. Um, and I think we kind of discussed that on the first episode of the second season, but I
Yes.
don't think that's what authenticity really means. I certainly don't think that's what you mean by it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's very true. So, um, yeah, I guess the thing is you jump into an episode and you're like, wow, there's a lot to unpack from each one of these.
Yeah,
We've talked quite a bit about this one, and I think that there's still more you can pull from it. I actually challenge people that are listening. It's like if you get a chance, sign up for. I think Apple even gives
it's
you
Apple. Yeah,
a free 30 days or something, and it's like you can binge through the whole 3 seasons quite quickly if you
yeah,
have a
absolutely.
few evenings. um, you
Yeah,
know
so I'd like to talk about the second episode that you
yeah,
want to talk about, but I want to do that in another episode because of the time. So,
yeah,
well,
absolutely.
but what I wanted to say about the show, um,
Hmm.
I think it's a really interesting show. It's as we said, it's on Apple TV. You can watch all of it on there. You can binge it. But there's also another program on Apple that I don't know whether you've watched yet. I'm gonna talk about Severance if I can at some point. So,
Sure.
have you watched Severance?
So I've caught a few episodes. A good
Right.
friend of mine who he's a legal attorney
Okay.
for a corporate world, and he actually said you got to check this
You
episode
really
out.
do.
And
Yeah.
so I got into it. I've been focused on Ted Lasso,
Yeah.
but I've been watching that,
Yeah.
and so I definitely want to get into that because I kind of almost know where you're going
It's just
just on the
absolutely. I
premise
mean,
of it.
Severance has.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so relevant to corporate life, but it
Hmm.
goes much beyond that. So yeah, we're talking about Ted Lasso today, but I'm giving you notice that at some point in the future, I want to talk about Severance. I mean, I
Let's
could
do it.
honestly talk about that for a whole season. It's just absolutely brilliant. Slow at the beginning. It is quite a slow thing, but you've really got to
Hmm.
think about what you're watching, and it's very very layered. So yeah, I recommend that.
Yeah.
So hey,
Yeah. Absolutely.
let's bring this episode to a close.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening, everybody. It's been really interesting, and thank you, Jared, for the chat and for suggesting Ted Lasso. When I first saw him, I
My
thought he
pleasure.
was Ned Flanders. I thought that was basically who he was, but
Yeah.
a lot of a deeper character than that. So let's pick up the conversation on our next episode. For now, thank you for
Sounds
listening.
great.
Don't forget to subscribe and recommend the podcast to other people. It's early days yet for our podcast, and we really need it to grow. So if you think it's kind of interesting, then please let other people know about it and give us some feedback about what you want us to talk about. And that would be great if you could do that. Thank you. Bye for now.
Thanks a lot.